And no.
Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating. From the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day, each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello, and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Well, we're doing like a show from across the pond because in the first hour, we're going to be speaking to Maria Wheatley about the standing stones in England, and in the second hour with Robert Feather about the Black Sea, or the Black Sea Scrolls, the Dead Sea Scrolls. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio can be heard live on the Inception Radio Network. You can tune into inceptionradio.com, or you can download the Android or iPhone app right to your phone and listen, like while you're in your car or at work, working really hard at work, or wherever you go. It's very cool. Couple of announcements. On December 21st, is obviously the end of the world. But in case the world doesn't end, we'll be here live on Just Energy Radio from 3 to 5 p.m. or Eastern Standard Time. And we're opening up the phone lines because we want to hear your amazing stories of survival. How many cases of beans did you buy and stack up in your garage? Or maybe your neighbor built a bunker. Then there are the people that have been looking for the transition or ascension of ourselves into a new spiritual plane. And we want to hear those stories too, what you're experiencing now. Where do you think we're moving forward from this point in time? But your thoughts and feelings are really important. And the biggest thing is we want everybody on that day to just breathe, laugh and breathe at our own silliness. So do tune in live, December 21st, 2012, 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to the show. I also wanted to talk a little bit about our new book, Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods. We have been getting some phenomenal reviews, and I wanted to share one of the new ones with you. And this is from Chase, and Chase writes, Dr. Rita Louise has absolutely nailed this one. Understanding our possible origins from a formal interpretation of ancient texts and writings can be daunting as researchers try to connect the dots. But this fantastic work seamlessly does this for us. I was thrilled by the easy pace, especially with the bombshell information. The authors of Man-Made promise new potentials. I promise you will be challenged with your eyes wide open. It's not often we have a work this significant available. I just wish there were more stars to rate this book. On a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 12. How excellent is that? So if you haven't gotten your copy of Man-Made, The Chronicles of Our Extraterrestrial Gods, it's available through Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. The Kindle version is available. But if you want an autographed copy of the book, please do go to my website, soulhealer.com, and you can get a book there. And while you're there, please do check out the products and services that I offer, either in office in the Dallas area or over the phone anywhere around the world. And also, please do go to the Just Energy Radio webpage and sign up for our weekly newsletter where you can be kept informed of all of the excellent programming we have coming up for the rest of the year. And then if we survive December 21st, 2012, next year too. Oh, one last thing. Starting January 3rd, we are moving to Thursday night from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on the Inception Radio Network. And that's where you'll be able to hear us live. So let me tell you a little bit about Maria, my first guest, and get her on the air. Maria Wheatley is a writer, dowser, and researcher of Earth mysteries, specializing in the geodetic system of Earth energies and ley lines. She organizes regular tours of sacred sites and medieval churches and cathedrals in the southwest of England to locate and interact with the monument's hidden energies. She is co-author of Avebury, Sun, Moon, and Earth, a popular book which reveals the many ley lines and earth energies that were skillfully integrated into the megalithic architecture of Avebury Henge. Her website is www.theaveburyexperience.co.uk. But please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Maria Wheatley. Hi, Maria. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks.
Well, thank you so much for coming on to the show and sharing your information and experience about the standing stones in Europe.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me.
So how did you first become interested in standing stones in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. Mainly through my late father, Dennis Wheatley, who's considered one of the UK's top dowsers. And he really researched things like the different energy patterns associated with ancient sites worldwide, especially the stone circles such as Stonehenge and Avebury, and also hidden Templar encodements in churches. It seems that our ancient ancestors were very much aware of earth energy patterns, and they located these patterns, which dictated the site and the size quite often of their monuments.
Interesting. And for those listeners that don't really know what we mean by standing stones, can you just kind of give them a little introduction to what a standing stone is?
Yeah, sure. Round about the Neolithic era, which is from about 4000 BC to 2500 BC, our ancient ancestors erected standing stones. Sometimes these standing stones can be quite small, about 3 or 4 feet tall, and sometimes they can be very large, like at Stonehenge, where the largest standing stone is some 25 feet high and 8 feet into the ground. And quite often the standing stones were set in long avenues, paired avenues, or they were set in a circular motif. These standing stones were like temple complexes for the ancient community, possibly for healing and for raising one's consciousness.
Okay. Are there, and let's just kind of keep this right now to the UK, are there a lot of these standing stone sites around the country?
Oh, yeah. I mean, considering, some of the sites are over 5,000 years old, 900 stone circles still survive in England and Scotland and Ireland alone. So, I mean, these were vast temple systems that were intimately associated with things like ley lines and their very long linear alignments across the landscape. And, ley lines were a very important part of the stone circle building phase. In fact, one ley line, which is quite well documented, easy to find on the internet, is called the St. Michael ley line, and it courses from the west of England to the east of England. It's some 300 miles long, and right at the exact center of that ley line is Avebury Henge, which contains the world's largest stone circle. So our ancient ancestors were very careful about where they sited their monuments, because it's quite a well-known fact that, ley lines do conduct an electromagnetic signal, normally around what we found with our sensitive detecting equipment to be about sort of 25 hertz to about 8 hertz. So they looked for these kind of ley lines, and then they looked for certain other patterns within the landscape as well that are almost like harmonic energy patterns, such as the geospiral phenomenon, and that's the kind of energy pattern that is circular and it's constantly moving and swirling and associated with underground water. So they were looking for specific patterns and lines in the ancient landscape.
Well, one of the things that I was wondering, you made the comment that they were ceremonial sites. Could they have been used for something else? And I'm kind of even jumping ahead in my own little list of questions here. There are people, and I'm kind of going to a different area, but I think you'll see where I'm going, that claim like the pyramid was a machine, that it created energy. Is it possible that these stone circles were some kind of energy generators or portals or something other than a place where people went to do ritual?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think they were energy generators without a shadow of a doubt. And one form of energy that they were harnessing, to the ancient Chinese geomants, for example, they would call the power in the land, the earth energy patterns and the ley lines, Lung Mei, the dragon's breath. And they believed in China that you could harness this energy force and that you could even transmit it across the landscape. One way of harnessing the energy was to site standing stones above these energy patterns. So when you root a standing stone into the earth energy or into the ley line, it begins to transmit this energy in a particular manner and then transmit it across the landscape. Where this energy comes from is quite interesting. It's been researched for about 80 years now, and one source is definitely underground water, of which to water diviners, and I come from a water divining family, my father was a water diviner and I've divined for water, we believe there's two types of water, for example, yin water and yang water. And yang water, we're all familiar with that type of water. It pulls from the sky and the clouds and fills up the aquifers and the underground streams and our reservoirs. But to the ancient mindset and water diviners, there's another type of water. We call it yin water that's perpetually generated within the earth itself. It's an endless supply. It's fresh and it's considered healing. Now, that particular type of underground water, considered sacred to the ancients, emits a spiral pattern that is circular. And that's what the ancients were looking for when they built stone circles, and they sited the standing stones around the spiral circular pattern. And then that electromagnetic frequency seems to be absorbed and transmitted by the stone. So we see underground water to be very significant into how to generate energy within the landscape and how to transmit it across the landscape by using ley lines and other forms of earth energy. So one key factor of the energy is the underground water. That is a factor in England, especially in Ireland and places where we go to tour and interact with these types of energy. It's always associated with that type of water. And where the yin water breaks through the ground, for example, to become surface water, that's your holy healing spring. And when it's bored in medieval times, that became your holy well because it was renowned for healing properties.
That's pretty cool. I think it's interesting that these sites, the standing stone sites, have that water association because you hear of these underground tunnels, running underground water, associated with so many other sacred sites around the world.
It was a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, what we call it over here is a design canon. It's an esoteric design canon. The ancients were looking for that pattern. And it can raise, your kind of consciousness, for one, to a really good alpha brain frequencies. In fact, in the Second World War, a really good documentation of the healing power of yin water was recorded in England. There was a mass healing during the Second World War. Because during that time, obviously, London and cities were being blitzed. So a lot of people took to the underground caves, to evade the bombings. Now, when they spent a long time down here, and there was 15,000 people in the Chislehurst caves in Kent, all spending time together. When they came back to the surface, so to speak, it was found that a lot of them were instantly cured of rheumatic pains and illnesses. In fact, over 8,000 people were cured, and that was always associated with ancient earth energies. The geospiral and ley lines all seem to really focus in on those ancient caves used for thousands of years.
That's really cool. Do you know who Dr. Sam Osmanagosh is? You know, he's doing the Bosnian pyramid research.
Yes, I've heard and read about him.
Okay. I mean, and that's one of the things that he has been finding, because they have been digging out these tunnels that lead into the pyramid complex, and there's water that is in that area, and people have been going in and coming out feeling a lot better. Or, you know, people that aren't feeling good are going in and, you know, I don't want to say being cured, but kind of being cured. You know, one of the things that he associated it with was high ionization levels in the caves and tunnels. Did you find that there? Did anybody look?
Yeah, we've used that type of equipment to detect the ion levels in the air around certain standing stones, renowned for different things, one of which is definitely healing. And what we found was, by the energy point, the Earth energy point, the ions became really highly negative ions, very good for us, yeah? And the control sample, which we used, which was just a couple of feet away or half a meter away, the ions went right back to how they should be. So if you imagine that over certain particular types of earth energy, you have a fountain of outpouring of negative ions, which is going to make you feel much more better, much more healthy, and give you vitality. So I very much agree with that type of research coming from the Bosnian pyramids, because we're certainly finding it within stone circles. But more than that, despite the mass healing that was experienced during the Second World War, other soldiers reporting very similar things. For example, animals know what's good for them instinctively. An animal will go to a safe place to give birth and to rest during the night. And what the animals tend to do, especially horses, cattle and sheep, they tend to look for these spiral patterns of earth energy. They intuitively must see them or sense them in some way, and they rest them. So the soldiers during World War II across England and in France used to look to where cows had laid the previous night, and they used to coopy down and sleep, and they all reported a very similar thing. They would wake up with no aches and pains, and they would feel really good. But more than that, they all had and shared a very similar vision. A woman would come to them. That could have been their lover, their wife, their mum, their aunt, and she would tell them they're going to be okay. And they would register that in themselves, and then obviously they survived the war to tell these types of stories. So it's associated that with these earth energy patterns, you quite often get a manifestation of the goddess, be that in the guise of your wife or somebody. And these types of stories are really reoccurring all over the world, even in France, where the famous healing spring of Lourdes burst forth from the ground in front of the young girl. She saw the personification of the goddess in the guise of the Virgin Mary. So it seems that the earth energies are intimately associated with these types of female manifestations, which obviously can be very life-changing for some people.
Well, one of the things that I've always heard, experienced and believe, is that spiritual energy, you know, AKA ghosts, travel along ley lines, you know, and I mean, part of what I do is ghost hunting and have been in locations where there's a big old ley line or some kind of underground running water under a property, and people are constantly complaining about all of this activity in their location. You know, so I think that's another interesting parallel.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, in England, we have other types of, you know, ghostly apparitions around ley lines, one of which is the famous black dog, like a hound from hell, that will always travel in a straight line. So, again, it's like any paranormal experience associated with the ley line, whether that's, you know, ghost hunting you've experienced, problems from underground water. It's almost as if they carry a certain force, which in ancient China was called Ling, the earth spirit, it would carry this along its course, and it caused things to manifest, good or bad, if you will. And it's quite interesting because the documentation in the UK regarding ley lines is that's just a part of a much wider energy system, because in the 1980s, two authors, Hamish Miller and Paul Broadhurst, discovered that intimately associated with the ley line, if you imagine the ley line going dead straight and coiling it with two currents, almost like snakes weaving around the ley line. And they called them Mary and Michael because one seemed strong and kind of masculine and one seemed quite delicate and healing, which was yin. And they called these energies Mary and Michael, which entwined a ley line called the St. Michael Lane, because interestingly, every literally 5 or so miles along the Michael current entwining the ley line, they discovered a church dedicated to St. Michael. And along the Mary current, every 5 to 10 miles, they discovered a church on that earth energy current dedicated to the Virgin Mary or Mary Magdalene. So we see ley lines as being just a part of a much wider system with these encoiling, dragging currents going around them. And it seems to me the ley line seems to almost control these two very powerful currents, because the currents never flow more than, say, 2 to 3 miles away from this ley line. So the ancients seem to be able to anchor the earth currents naturally in the land by using the ley line. And it is certainly evident that because there is 188 churches on that 300-mile-long ley line, it is obvious that the medieval Masons and the Knights Templar inherited the knowledge of our Neolithic ancestors that built the stone circles, and they constructed their churches on these energy lines. In fact, in most cases, like Glastonbury Abbey, for example, and other churches alike, the earth current goes straight down the center axis line of the church. And it's the type of energy line, be that yin or be that yang, that dictates what kind of saint the church is going to be dedicated to. In the case of Glastonbury Abbey, for example, the Mary current runs down the axis of the abbey, and therefore it's a female energy line, therefore it's dedicated to St. Mary. And that's why certain churches are considered male or female, for example. And again, if you walk along these energy lines, you're walking in harmony with the Schumann resonance, about 8 hertz, bringing your brain into a very relaxed state. And you have in churches and stone circles alike, as well as those energy currents, the male or the female, you have specific areas called power points. And if you stand on these and you're able to photograph it with coherent photography, your aura begins to expand and expand and expand. Now, that's just 3 minutes of standing on a PowerPoint, but interestingly, what European dowsers and research have found that 4 days later, just after 3 minutes of interacting on a Earth Energy PowerPoint, your aura is still expanding, spiritually and health-wise. That's very interesting that it can really change our spirituality as well. And the ancients were fully aware of this, whether they were the Templars or the Stone Circle, because they all integrate particular types of earth energies.
Well, and it sounds like, well, actually, I want to make a comment. You're talking about this, weaving in and out of the male-female energy, and it just brings to mind in, the Hindu tradition, talking about chakras and energy movements, the Ida and Pygnalia that, go around the main energy channel that goes up and down the spine that is responsible for the creation of the chakras. So I think there's just a very interesting earth-based parallel to the, spiritual, our energy system. But it seems,
absolutely.
But what I think is interesting is that it with having some kind of a church or structure there, it would increase your opportunity to have a very profound spiritual experience.
Well, you're absolutely
quote
right.
Unquote.
Yeah. You're absolutely right, because that image of, the line going up the chakra system with the 2 coils going around, that's exactly how that ley line system operates. Your 100% right there. And you're talking about the human chakra system of, 7 main chakra points. Well, most Earth energy sites, whether, like you spoke about, Glastonbury Abbey or Stonehenge, or even some of the long barrows in Ireland, which our tours often go to, all of those sites share in common with the human chakra system 7 sacred power points. So as you're walking along a mound or you're walking round a stone circle, you're interacting with those 7 points, which affect, our chakra system. So that we're very similar to the ancient sites. And maybe it's because they were built around the knowledge of the human energy system, or vice versa it could be. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? But they both share those similarities that you perceived.
That's very cool. But, there's that axiom, as above, so below. So it doesn't really surprise me at all that that's what we find.
No, it's not at all. The ancients went to extreme lengths to cite the ancient sites where these earth energy patterns were, especially the geospiral. Take Stonehenge, for instance. Most people are familiar with what Stonehenge looks like. It was a circle of 30 stones, and it had lintels all along the top, some of which were weighing up to 60 tons to be erected, and the lintels on the top were about 4 tons. You're talking about an engineering sophistication and wisdom of these ancient peoples just to put the stones up. But if you look at the lands upon which they chose to site Stonehenge, it's on sloping ground. So that compiles any engineering problem, because one side of Stonehenge had to go in an extra foot or 2 into the ground compared to the other side of Stonehenge. And that's because they wanted to site the center of that monument, incorporating the geospiral pattern, which imbues then the stones and the structure with unseen power. And it's interesting you mentioned the chakra system, Rita, because when the stone, again, is rooted into a geospiral, I mentioned earlier that it kind of absorbs the energy, but it does so in a particular manner, which is outlined on my website under Megalithic Energy. It absorbs it in 7 key points going up the stone. So these 7 key points then transmit energy across the landscape to other stones in the stone circle, or way away from that monument, sometimes up to 6 or so miles away. So it's not that we should see ancient monuments in isolation. They're actually communicating, if you will, through this linear beam of energy that they've absorbed to one another. So they're all intimately connected and associated with each other. And the remarkable thing that we recorded about this kind of megalithic chakra energy, if I can call it that, is that it is just below the ability of humans to hear it. What's called infrasound. So could it be that our ancient ancestors, when they erected those stones and they rooted them into those earth energy patterns, and when they came alive, if you like, and their own chakra systems became fully integrated, could our ancient ancestors have heard the stones? Aborigines from Australia talk of song lines, for example. So I'm sure that because it's just below the audible frequency of you and I today, our ancient ancestors, being far more sensitive, could hear the sounds of the stones.
Well, just listening to you talk about it, I'm like, okay, I know I could feel it. All I have to do is go by power lines, and it's like, oh, God, what's that? It's like, oh, power lines. So when you're talking about these different bands of energy and different levels of energy, are we talking about each individual stones, or when the stones are in unison with each other?
Each individual stone behaves in a particular manner. It will have 7 key energy points which absorb and then transmit the energy. And again, with that frequency that we've discovered is just beyond our audible ability to hear that energy. And there's a British researcher called Harry Oldfield. He developed a filter which he claims can literally photograph Earth energy and different sorts of energy as well. So I was joined by one of his colleagues at an ancient site in the southwest of England, called Wayland Smithy longbow. It's a beautiful atmospheric longbow with internal chambers that kind of resonate sound, and you would certainly feel energy from them. And he photographed them, and I was saying, well, these are the 7 bands, and they're likened to the 7 chakra system, as we've been discussing. And remarkably, on the camera, he caught the sequence of rainbow light, starting with the red section at the bottom, going right the way through to the higher violet colors, which are the colors of the chakra system. So these energy bands pulsate out light as well as sound, and that it corresponds exactly to the colors of the chakra system, which start with the base chakra, as lots of us know, being red, through to the higher violet. So when we're stood by a standing stone, it might seem you're in a field, just stood by a standing stone, but what's really going on is that you're stood in a rainbow field of light, you're in an audible sound field, and you're interacting with that stone's energy field of sound and of light and of frequency and of vibration.
Wow. And the reason I asked you the question was, is it each individual stone? Because my mind is going, okay, but what if this, I'm making the assumption that, having the stones in a circle would amplify their ability, make them work in concert to make, it would be a very powerful thing, I would think, but I'm assuming also, and maybe you can address this, that there aren't any circles that are whole anymore.
That's a really interesting question that you've raised. There are a few circles that are still whole in the UK, actually, and they do function as a stone circle proper. But you're right, and again, your perception of where you go with your questions. Because, yes, if you have a stone circle proper, as Stonehenge was, they're ruinous now. Stonehenge is ruinous, and sadly so is Avebury Henge, although they still have power. But once they act as a circle and they are in unison, and you said that beautifully in concert, I thought, yeah, that really does describe it very well. Because once they're acting as one, they really do increase in their kind of energy field, and then they transmit it around. But more than that, the circular shape, circle, it could be a circle on a piece of paper, or as occultist old used to draw a circle of salt on the ground. Once you have the shape of a circle alone, that generates an energy pattern which we call in the UK form energy. And it's like the circle will become concentric, pulsating other concentric circles around it, which is considered protective. And if you douse or interact with them, they kind of go yin yang, like positive, negative. So you imagine the stone circle just to be surrounded by lots of other concentric circles of energy. That's what a stone circle is capable of doing. And then, with recordable equipment done by Dr. John Robbins back in the 70s and 80s, what he found was that the stone circle in Rollright, Oxfordshire, UK, a beautiful, immaculate stone circle, still retaining the circular shape, it pulses out radiation, that's natural radiation, not associated with, nuclear power, for example, but natural radiation and ultra sound. So it's pushing out with dynamic force, ultrasound and radiation across the landscape. And he called that the Song of the Stones. So it really does push out energy as if it's irrigating the land. And if people are there, or animals, or plant life around that stone circle, it seems to increase, our own energy fields as well through the ultrasound and the radiation, which are pulsating. And again, what Dr. Robbins discovered at other ancient sites, such as Avebury, and I've also collaborated his research, that if you walk across an energy line, remarkably, that's often set by the standing stones mark the energy lines in the landscape, and you walk across it, you're walking into a lower radiation field. So outside of the stone circle, outside of the long row, or avenues we call them, of stones, the radiation is different from the inside to the outside. And that's quite remarkable. It's almost like they were radiation shelters, because they radically reduce the background cosmic radiation.
Well, don't they find the same kind of phenomena with, the radiation being inside but not outside at crop circles too?
Yes, again, I'm in the heart of crop circle country here, and quite often, on the tours that we're going to do in the summer, we do interact with crop circles. They're very popular. And again, a lot of the crop circles are associated with the identical earth energy patterns found in stone circles. They share an awful lot in common, of which I've lectured on over here in the UK at crop circle conferences, because they are like modern day temples.
Interesting. One of the things that I noticed in, doing some research about Avebury, and I saw some pictures, was it looks like there are houses built right in the middle of the circle. Are there?
Yeah, it is. I know it's quite remarkable to think that. I mean, it's a World Heritage Site, and you've got this little quaint English village sited right in the centre of it. Yeah, you do have houses and even a pub and a restaurant sited within the stone circle. But we must remember, Avebury Henge Stone Circle is the largest in the world, and the entire complex consisted of over 700 standing stones, most of them weighing about 60 tons. And it's covered 3 miles of the landscape. Yeah, wow. It's a huge, huge site. And the village is just a small part of that. And also contained within the Avebury Henge monument is a gigantic mound, a very large man-made mound, dated probably about 5,000 years old, it's believed. And I think probably older than that. And that was built on a very similar principle to Wilhelm Reich's free orgone energy generators. You have a layer of organic and inorganic material going right up this mound that is very, very large. And in some of the mounds in this area, there's traces of copper going right the way down the center, as if somehow the ancients created these like orgone accumulators which release vast amounts of energy throughout the landscape. So they were definitely knowing how to make, literally, 5,000 years before Wilhelm Reich and Tesla and people, they were able to create these energy generating structures.
Well, I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind when you talk about the layers of organic or inorganic and organic makes me go right to like electronics. And I know I'm just kind of going out on a left field here for a second. Like something like a resistor or a capacitor that either is like calming down the energy or collecting the energy, and I don't remember which one is the, conductive and non-conductive, but there's one of them. I'm pretty sure that's the makeup, But anyway, this is very cool. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm learning so much. I just can't even imagine living in one of those houses in that village,
Well, it would keep you busy, Rita, because it's claimed that when a cottage or a house or a farm is made of the stones that once came from Avebury Henge, they then themselves become very haunted by an entity that will kind of cause a lot of poltergeist activity within some of the houses in the stone circle. And also what local people have found is that earth energy will amplify your thoughts and feelings. Well, that's great if you're feeling really happy and you're really feeling fine and balanced. That's fantastic. But if you're feeling slightly down, it will amplify that type of thought, make you feel even worse. So a lot of people that are very sensitive that live within the stone circle spend some time going away. And, literally they say, we have a saying, the light can shine too bright. You need to leave for a while to, integrate your own energies, because it is very, very powerful. These are power centers, Stonehenge and Avebury, just like the pyramids of Egypt and in Mexico. These are power centers. They were epicenters marked out in the land by our ancient ancestors. And what I like to think about, earth energies and my work with the invisible forces within the earth is, well, the ancients could have used it for healing and for communication and for creating energy. Well, now is the time to rediscover ancient wisdom and apply it to a modern generation. So, for example, the geospiral pattern, renowned for healing, that should be really integrated into hospitals and schools and care homes for the elderly. We should be living in harmony with the earth now and integrating these earth energy patterns. The ancient Chinese created feng shui to not just to hang wind chimes in a house, but to really control Long Mei, the dragon's breath. And I truly believe that if we go back to these ancient awareness of earth energies and live in harmony with it, we can heal ourselves faster. And also some ley lines, for example, are associated with enhancing one's communication powers, the spoken and the written word. But if that ley line is associated with that particular attribute, what if we incorporated that into schools where children are dyslexic, autistic? We can literally integrate all of these energies. I'm proud to say I'm working with a few corporations that have taken these ideas seriously for future building programs. And that's where we need to go to take that ancient wisdom and apply it to our modern day lives, especially for our children.
Well, wouldn't that be a wonderful world to live in?
well, absolutely. And we've got to take those first steps now, rather than just saying, okay, the pyramids were built for X, Stonehenge was built for Y. Well, let's look at those common factors that are associated with those ancient sites and let's integrate it into our modern day lives. I mean, that's like you yourself know with your ghost hunting, and you mentioned earlier, underground yang water is always associated 9 times out of 10 with, ghostly apparitions and things like that. Well, likewise, if you find underground yin streams, that's associated with the healing earth force. So again, we can look to land that hasn't been built on, find out what type of harmonics are there, what type of water's there, what type of energy field is there, and build accordingly. And that's what they did in ancient China. They built according to the harmonics of the land. And that's, again, where I'd like to go in the future.
Or they made adjustments to any imbalances to make it be more balanced, mirrors and colors and stuff to balance the energy if there was a discord in that location, which I think is very cool. But let's go back to the energy of these stones, because I don't know if you mentioned this, but what kind of energy, I know that you said that you've measured it, but do you have any idea of what kind of energy the stones are giving off? I mean, is there a word for it other than subtle energy?
Yeah, it's like electromagnetic. It generates its own magnetic field, so it's definitely in the electromagnetic spectrum. So that's the type of energy it is, and then you can analyze the frequency of it. And sometimes it changes the ions in the air, but it all seems to stem down from the electromagnetic natural currents in the landscape. So I think that's what type of energy it is, which the ancients would call, for example, qi. They had one name for it, we have another name for it, but they both mean the same thing, and it flows across the landscape. It's all earth energy is always in perpetual motion.
So is there any thoughts on what is causing the stones to have this energy or vibration associated with them? Is it the stone? Is it because the stone is in this location and has absorbed the energy? Any thoughts?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yes, well, the standing stone can be rooted into the earth energy pattern, but the stone plays a major part, because a lot of the stones around Avebury and the stones that you use for Stonehenge and numerous other stone circles and temples tended to use what we call in this area sarsen stone. It's like a sandstone. A lot of the sandstone in this area is silicon based. So if we look at a standing stone to be predominantly silicon at times, well, it's very similar to like a microchip that you use in your modern day cars and your computers, which can, memorize and transmit energy. So the kind of internal makeup of a standing stone, which is predominantly silicon, has a matrix, crystal lattice matrix structure, and it's that can resonate to certain frequencies. And we believe, organize the energy in particular manner. So yes, it's down to where it's sited into the earth energy. It was also about the stone organizing it within its own kind of lattice silicon structure. We kind of liken the stones over here to like macrochips rather than small microchips. But really, there's no difference between the standing stone at Avebury or Stonehenge or your modern day silicon microchip that you use in your computers. They're very, very similar.
One of the questions I'd like to ask, the stones that are at Avebury and even and Stonehenge are not neatly cut and surfaced. Do you think that that was the intention of the builders, or could it be, that these stones are just much, much older than is currently put out there?
Yeah, I do believe they're much, much older. Yeah. For example, Avebury is in its natural state. They're not work stones, but Stonehenge has been made quite lozenge shaped, so they're like kind of worked stones. But you're right about the dating system, because archaeologists, what they do is they find something underneath a temple, they find something underneath a stone that's organic, like say an antler or a bit of bone or whatever. They can carbon date that, and through that carbon dating, which isn't 100% accurate, they say, we found this on the old surface level and it dates to 3000 BC, therefore the monument is 3000 years old. And that's how they date most monuments worldwide. But in the case of Stonehenge, for example, they found underneath one stone some organic material which they could carbon date, and when they got the dates back from the lab, they dismissed it because it seemed too old. It was
how old was it?
Well, in that case, it was about 2,000 years older. Yeah. And some of the older, very old sites in Stonehenge, they date back to 8,500 BC. And I think with a little leap of faith, with some other organic material that is being dismissed, because when it doesn't fall into the archaeological mindset, they dismiss the evidence. And some evidence is suggesting that some of the early structures at Stonehenge possibly date back as far as 10,500 BC.
But see, that I find that interesting, with them finding Göbekli Tepe and everybody going, well, it's kind of like Stonehenge, but not, adds credence to that circular design and circular pattern and the multiple of them that you find in the UK.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think, that now that they have different forms of testing, hopefully we'll get some more accurate dating systems, especially from what they're using at the moment, which is isotopes over here. And that tells where people come from, because through the enamel in teeth that's left behind, you can tell where you first drank your water. And then if you move, say at the age of 15, you move somewhere else and drink the water again, it all registers in your teeth in forms of isotopes and indeed in your bones. And what they found around the Stonehenge area, it was an international epicenter. You had people from Germany, from the Baltics, they found beads from Egypt, and a lot of information came from the enamel in teeth left behind. So these were international places. People were traveling, they were moving around, they were exchanging ideas. These were epicenters and learning centers. And Pythagoras, that famous Greek philosopher, he was alleged to have come to Britain to learn from the ancient Druids. So we see an exchange of information, an exchange of ideas and cultures.
Well, since we're kind of talking about antiquity, are there any myths or legends as to who constructed these circles associated with them?
Well, Stonehenge is associated with a myth of Merlin and King Arthur. And Merlin transported the stones for Uther Pendragon, King Arthur's father or uncle. I think it was his uncle, actually. So they're associated with magic and witchcraft quite often. And at Stonehenge, long before it was called Stonehenge, to the sort of indigenous British people, it was called the Giant's Dance, a gigantic stone. And it was often wondered why the Giant's Dance. And it's always been kept in lots of folklore and myths and stories. Yes, it's called the Giant's Dance. And once when I was with my late father and we were with a group and we were walking down towards Stonehenge, probably about 2 miles from the monument, you could just see it beginning to skyline. It was a really hazy, beautiful, sunny day. And we looked at Stonehenge, and through the haze, it looked like the stones were moving and dancing, and like there was a shadowy figure moving around. So I think the reason it was called in lots of old stories, the Giant's Dance, is because from particular points as you approach the monument, it jumps around. It's very, very unusual.
But maybe there are giants that are dancing, like ghostly giants dancing here.
Well, if that indeed is the case, they certainly make those stones move. Yeah, definitely. I can see. I'll look out for that next time I'm there. But yeah, these are sites that are associated with a lot of myths and stories. But the most famous is the magician Merlin moves them.
But I mean, for me, that one is just a little hard to buy because we know that minimally they date the current structure, because isn't the one that we see now the third construction supposedly at Stonehenge? And so even if Merlin moved the stones, that predates the whole King Arthur legend in the first place.
Oh, absolutely. That is a myth. That is a good story, but it is just a myth. And you're right. You see, it's called phases at Stonehenge. You have phase 1 building, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. And from phase 1 to phase 5, where they built different sections of the monument, that took 1,000 years to build Stonehenge from start to finish. 1,000
Wow,
years.
And only 25 years to build the pyramid. Dang. Or 20.
Yeah, it was 1,000 years of work. They kept changing the idea. They kept moving the stones. And it was like a design plan created 1,000 years before. And it took 1,000 years to finish because of the different phases. So whatever they were doing at Stonehenge, this was a long-term project. And think of us today. We can't even get 4 years ahead. Well, we can't in the UK anyway. We vote people in for 4 years and then they bring in all of these plans and they can't even think long term. Well, in ancient Britain, they were thinking long term. And even at Avebury, again, that's 1,000 years of tinkering around with the monument, making it pristine, getting the right design canon. It wasn't overnight.
But if it was some kind of piece of equipment, they might have been just fine-tuning it to get a cleaner channel, a cleaner frequency happening, which would make perfect sense in that context.
Oh, absolutely, and I think that's what they were doing, and they were fine-tuning, and each time they reset a stone slightly differently, they were fine-tuning and possibly changing the frequencies for different astrological eras, and, bringing in kind of celestial energies as well. So I think it was a lot to do with the ages that they were living in and different ways of interpreting, different aspects of the astrological side of monuments, most definitely. But it's quite interesting. A lot of people say, which is quite strange about Stonehenge, well, if it was, destroyed in a point in history, like, for example, by the Romans, and it was, knocked down, or by Christians because it was a pagan temple, then a lot of the stones are missing and were not used for building material around the area because you can't see it now. So there's a train of thought that is that it was deliberately dismantled, and that a lot of the stone temples over here and stone circles didn't become ruinous through the act of vandalism down through the millennia, but they were dismantled. There might have been a huge energy overload, and therefore they had to change the energy frequencies by dismantling them.
I think that's interesting because one of the things that they say about the pyramids, for example, is that the capstones are all missing.
Yeah.
And the thought is they took them off because it made them be non-functional.
Yeah. And that's a very similar thought at Stonehenge, that was deliberately dismantled. And in fact, even some of the kind of real left-brain archaeologists are now thinking along those lines, that was dismantled purposely so, not randomly, but purposely, because some of the stones that are by other stones indicate that that was an act of intelligent decision rather than random vandalism.
Wow. Yet another conspiracy theory. Maria, this hour has flown by. You were wonderful. I'm so glad that you came on.
Thank you, Rita.
So, your book, your website, you mentioned something about tours. You know, if you want to give out all that information to the listeners, how they can get a hold of you, et cetera, it's your chance.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, go to the website, www.theaveburyexperience.co.uk. We do tours. We always welcome American visitors over to visit and interact with the earth energies of like Stonehenge, the crop circles and islands. So we're planning a tour in July 2013. So, you know, go to the website. We're going to keep updating it and get more information about that tour out. And also I teach correspondence courses and Skype lessons, all of which are on the website. So, yeah, just check that out.
Okay, and the name of your book is?
The name of the book is Avebury, Sun, Moon and Earth, which covers all the esoteric design canons of stone circles in the UK, focusing on Avebury Henge is the main example. And just recently, Ozark Mountain Publishing, run by Dolores Cannon in the US, she's recently published the Essential Dowsing Guide for me, and I'm going to have 2 other books coming out, one about how to interact and find and locate earth energies in the sacred landscape, and another one giving ideas about the hidden Templar codes within churches, all for Ozark Mountain Publishing.
Cool. Well, you'll have to come back on when those books come out, and we can do this again.
Oh, definitely, Rita. Great.
Okay, well, I think the music's going to come up here in just a second. And so thank you again, Maria, for coming on. And we'll talk again soon.
Okay, take care. Bye.
Okay, thank you. That's Maria Wheatley. Her webpage is theaveburyexperience.co.uk. And we'll be back with Robert Feather after these words from our sponsors.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.